Thank you for recording. Great. So first Ben, then Jake Tibbetts from Eureka County and Eureka Soil and Water Conservation District in Nevada, and Matt Yost, professor of plant soils and climate at Utah State, is going to be joining us a little bit late, so he'll be the final speaker. So yeah, each of these people is bringing a different perspective on drought, varieties of water systems, surface water, groundwater, um, different solutions that are being implemented across the region. So really excited to hear what they have to say. And so we will first of all turn it over to Ben. Go ahead, Ben. And you should hopefully be able to share your screen if you have slides.
Hey Noah,
Okay.
did you want to introduce Canva briefly before we do that?
Should we do that now or should we do that for should we do it now?
I
Okay,
thought people might have ideas or questions they want to put in.
sure.
Yeah,
Let me grab
okay.
the link. Okay, so uh, for documenting our discussion here and our note taking, we're using Canva. So I've just dropped the link in there. And so, I mean, I would say if you have questions for the speakers, you can go ahead and use the chat. But if you have any sort of larger thoughts about the subject or whatever's coming up for you, go ahead and add a sticky note on Canva. It's very easy. You just click on elements, click on a sticky note, it'll pop up, start typing, and put that note wherever you feel that it belongs on the board there, and we'll use those notes later on to figure out, what the next steps are. So, all right. Um, any questions or troubles with Canva before we dive in? Great. Okay, so now for real, let's turn it over to Ben Shawcroft.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm just trying to make sure I'm sharing the right thing here.
Ben, if you go up at the top of your screen where it says display settings,
Yep, there it is.
yeah, and then hit switch, swap, or either one.
Oh,
Oh no, the other one, I think.
hang on here. All right, can you see that?
No.
Oh, come on now. We'll get there. How's that?
Okay, so we've got the window now. Try making it full screen. All right. Oh, there it is. Perfect.
Woo! Okay, everybody. Nice to be with you today. My name is Ben Shawcroft. I'm the general manager of the Truckee-Carson Irrigation District. We are located in Fallon, Nevada, primarily. And just a little bit of my background. I've been in my position for the last 2 years. I'm a recovering attorney and now learning everything about water. So it's been kind of a really fun transition for me. Water is a very big passion of mine, and I have a little bit of an ag background through my family tree. Although I'm myself, I'm not a farmer. So, but anyway, so I wanted to just give you a little background of our irrigation district here. As you can see on the map here, we're located in kind of northwestern Nevada. If you drive an hour east of Reno, you'll go through Fallon, and we are the home of the Fallon Naval Air Station, and also which is also the home of the Navy's Top Gun Flight School. So, in fact, our office sits very close to the Navy base, and so pretty much throughout the entire day, I get to hear F-35s and other jets flying overhead. I'm just glad I'm on their side. That's all I can say. Um, but we are originally actually known as the Newlands, the Federal Newlands Project. So we are a project that was created as a creature of the Reclamation Act. In fact, we were one of the very first projects that were authorized upon the passage of that act. And so, everybody says they're proud of their history, and we're definitely no exception there. And so we go back a long time, and that also means that we have a lot of aging infrastructure, as many others have as well. For our water resources, we get our water from the Carson River, which is, you can see there on the south part of that map. And that is our primary source of water, which flows from the watersheds in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And we also have a supplementary water source, which comes through the Truckee River. And then we have a diversion that takes place at what's called the Derby Dam. And that is displayed here on the screen as the Truckee Canal. So the river itself, the Truckee River, continues on to its natural terminus, which is Pyramid Lake. And before it turns north there, we have our diversion works, which takes a portion of that water and dumps it into our reservoir. Now, of course, that created some issues back in the day when we were taking probably more than we needed to, and that caused some pretty significant harm to the Pyramid Lake, dropped the level of that lake significantly, was a bit of a natural an environmental harm that was happening there. So, of course, litigation ensued, and after many years of settlement agreements and court decrees, all of that is finally settled now, and we are ordered, I guess, by way of federal regulation to minimize our diversions from the Truckee Canal and try to use what we can primarily out of the Carson River. Our water rights are owned by the actual water users themselves, so it's not any kind of thing that's retained by the irrigation district or by the federal government. The rights themselves are owned by the users. Our main water storage is the Lahontan Reservoir, and it holds approximately 300,000 acre-feet of water, and that is here where the Truckee Canal dumps it into. It's on the Carson River, which continues below the dam as well, and we are the last user of that water. So anything that we don't use, or in a flood year when we have too much water, that all ends up just dumping out out here into the Carson Sink and then just evaporates. Our system is primarily just earthen ditches and canals. About 391 miles of canals and laterals that the irrigation district here operates and maintains. Our water users are all flood irrigators, so we're not doing any kind of business with pumping groundwater, and we actually have no pumps throughout the system to deliver water. So it's all simply through check structures and flood irrigation. Water usage type, we are primarily ag. There is a small sliver of municipal water use where they take some of that water out of the canal and treat it for municipal purposes. And we also have a good chunk that is used for wildlife. I always like to show one of these old-timey pictures that shows kind of what they were doing back in the day to build our infrastructure. It was just the fact that they were able to accomplish this with the tools and equipment that they had back then is still just makes me shake my head and just wonder how in the world it was possible. But they did it, and we're still using much of the unimproved infrastructure that they built back originally, with not much improvement done to it over the years. So moving on to drought, of course, Nevada, we are the driest state in the nation. And in our area here, we get less than 5 inches of rain per year. And I think that's actually a little high. I think it's more like 3. But that's what the internet said. But yeah, we are very dry. But I like to take people out to our reservoir, and and you can't really see it until you're upon it. And so it's kind of a shock to some people to drive over the ridge and see this big reservoir full of water, and see that yes, there is some water in Nevada. So the impact that we feel when we have a drought, as you can see, this is just kind of a timeline of when we see 100% allocation during the good years, and we go through drought cycles. And as you can see back, it was very difficult back in 2015 when we were at a 21% allocation for our water users. And that was basically turn it on, charge the canal, let them irrigate once, and that was it. You had to turn it off. But luckily, we were able to recover. 2017 was a huge year for snowpack up in the mountains, and that carried us through for approximately 4 years because of that just tremendous water supply we had then. Of course, drought returned, but then again in 2023, we had yet another big water year. And that got us back on track again for full allocations for our users. This is what it looks like out on some salt flats during a good year. It's usually just dry salt blowing in the wind, but that year it was filling up with water. And this, of course, I had to show a chicken standing in front of a snow chicken. And this is again, that was I think it was 2017 where somebody took this picture. I thought it was pretty great. We have a big fireworks display on New Year's Eve, and that year it was a massive snowstorm, so that doesn't happen very often. And this is what our reservoir looks like when it's full, about 300,000 acre-feet of water. That building in the center there is our intake tower, and so at the very bottom of that structure is where we have our intake for the water that's released from the reservoir. And then we have two hydropower stations on the other side of the dam. So this picture is taken on top of the dam. And we generate power from that intake. And then it's also released then into our diversion structures. This is what that tower looks like when it's dry. So you can see a big difference. And it always makes us very nervous whenever we start seeing the trash racks appearing on the tower, wondering what kind of year we're going to have the following summer. So this kind of leads into more of the I guess thing that we're working on right now, and that is how do we secure water for our future, given the fact that we do see these big drought cycles. And of course, when you have a drought like that, it takes many years for our producers to recover from a year like that. And so we're trying to find ways to reduce that impact when we are in that downward turn. So first of all, our river systems that we take water from, they are fully appropriated. All of the water rights are subject to court decree, so they're decreed rights. That means there's no more water. There's no more water that we can ask for. This is whatever makes its way to the reservoir. That's what we get. We cannot increase our capacity. We can't increase how much we're going to receive. This is the bucket with water in it. That's all we can use every year. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we are under a federal mandate to increase our conservation and to reduce our reliance on the Truckee River so that more of that water ends up in the Pyramid Lake. And so that's something we're always taking a look at, trying to figure out a way how to conserve water. Our current efficiency is about 63%, which is not good. We need to make improvements, but of course, improvements cost money, cost a lot of money. And right now, we just entered into a repayment contract with the Bureau for $35 million, and that was used to line about 3.5 miles of that Truckee Canal. And that was more of not necessarily a water savings project. It was more of a public safety project because of course, we have a lot of urban growth in that area. And so a lot of houses are sitting right next to that canal. So we had to line it in order to prevent any kind of breach into those neighborhoods. So Unfortunately, that means that our revenue that we get is really tied up into making those payments back to the Bureau, which makes it very difficult to come up with funding to do any other kind of improvements on our system. Well, thank goodness the USDA decided to step in this last summer. And as some of you may know, they announced that they are going to invest $400 million to address drought and support production of water-saving commodities. So they had some kind of formula that determined which irrigation districts money was going to be sent to. And luckily, our district somehow ended up on the list. So not that we had any big favors owed to us by any congressional folks, but it just somehow ended up being on the list. So what that means is that we are going to be receiving, hopefully by the end of this year, $15 million to make some improvements. That's going to include another canal lining project we're going to do that suffers a lot of loss from seepage. And we're also going to be building out our SCADA and automation infrastructure. We're looking at maybe about 100 plus sites that we're going to be adding automation and SCADA to. So that's going to be a huge leap forward for our district with technology, because we just haven't had the funding to be able to make some of those improvements to modernize our system. Total water savings between the two projects is going to be about 28,000 acre-feet of water, which is just a big deal. And so as we were discussing potential projects with USDA, we started talking about these and realized that what kind of impact it would have to save that amount of water. Our district is a little bit unique because the water right owners own their actual water rights. If we distributed $15 million to all the farmers to do improvements on their farms, that would be great, and but it wouldn't save any water because they're still entitled to receive their full allocation. And so it would mean they could perhaps have better production, maybe an extra couple of irrigations at the end of the season when things are drying up. And so that would help, but at the end of the day, they're still going to call upon their same amount of water every year. And so we were able to talk to the USDA and say, let's really focus on our system, our distribution system, because as we do that, then we're actually not calling upon that water out of the reservoir to make those deliveries. So 28,000 acre-feet of water either stays in the reservoir or it stays in the Truckee River and makes its way back to the Pyramid Lake. And so the benefits of that were just tremendous, where we were actually able to truly save wet water and keep it upstream from us. So that was a big deal to the USDA folks. That was a big deal to our board and those who were making those decisions here. And really looking forward to being able to do these projects. It's going to be a whirlwind trying to get all of this done in the time that they're giving us, but we're pretty confident we'll be able to get it done. And at the end of the day, we're hoping we get to see those efficiency numbers increase with that kind of investment being made. So that's all I have for the Truckee Carson Irrigation District. Anybody ever wants to come visit us, give me a call and I'll take you out to show you what we have. But it's a lot of fun. We live in a great area, a lot of wonderful people who live out here and farm the property here. But that I'll turn it back to our hosts and we'll keep going. Thanks.
Fantastic, Ben. Thank you. So yeah, we have a couple minutes. We can open it up for questions. If nobody has an immediate question, I will ask about, with canal lining, I guess, in general, if you're going to do any sort of system efficiency, there's always the question of was somebody relying on that seepage, as their water supply. And I know just from, looking up the reporting around your canal lining project, it was very contentious. So I wonder if you could comment a little bit on the trade-offs of, when you save water in one spot, then you're taking it from somewhere else downstream, so to speak.
Yeah, that was very contentious when we did the Truckee Canal lining. And that was because those folks, that was their only source of water. Naturally, there just wasn't much in their groundwater basin. And so they were very much relying on that seepage. It's kind of, we just found ourselves caught in a tough spot where the federal government was requiring the project to be done because of public safety. So we could prevent a massive flood. Because that actually happened in 2008. That canal breached and flooded hundreds of houses. So we absolutely had to do something to prevent that from happening again. And so the project we're doing now with some lining, we don't expect it to have that kind of impact. Number one, the area it's in is just, I mean, it's the valley here within I call it the main area of our irrigation district, the Fallon area, is just saturated with irrigation water. So, you have some areas in the valley you can dig, 6 to 10 feet and you're already at the water table. So it's actually more of a nuisance in this area. And so we don't, any small, a few miles here and there isn't going to have the impact that it had in the other area where we did the lining project. So
Great. And Emily has a question here about, do you have a plan for where the water savings go, in-stream flow or savings? Yeah, what happens with the water that you save?
yep. So so what'll happen is what happens is the water we take from the Truckee River, we're only allowed to take water from there if we're not going to be meeting our storage targets in Lahontan Reservoir. So if it looks like we're going to have a good year, the forecasts say that we're going to get enough water from the Carson River, then we don't take any water from the Truckee River. If it's kind of a close call, then we're not going to be able to meet those targets, then we'll divert water from the Truckee River. Now, what the water savings will do is it will say, okay, now that we have this 28,000 acre feet of water that we're saving, that's gonna remain in the reservoir. We don't have to take as much as historically we have to take from the Truckee River. So that saved water will stay in the Truckee River and make its way to Pyramid Lake.
Excellent. Yeah, I would suggest let's go ahead and keep things moving here, and we'll have more time for discussion at the end. So our next speaker will be Jake Tibbetts from Eureka County, Nevada, moving us a little bit east.
Right, thanks. I'm trying to get my screen here. Can you see my screen?
We see your screen. It's not strictly full screen, but it's
let me
pretty good. Yeah. Try that. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Noah, thanks for the introduction. Again, Jake Tibbetts. I'm the Natural Resources Manager for Eureka County, Nevada. So right in the center of the state. If you were to draw across Nevada, Eureka County and where I live is pretty much right in the dead center of the state. And really welcome the opportunity to be here today. I'm going to be a little philosophical here before I jump into some of the specifics of things we're doing here. But I wanted to first share about what I believe is the secret sauce to a lot of the efforts that we've been accomplishing with our producers on the ground. And it really is this keystone concept of locally led and incentive based. So, if you know the concept of a keystone, you look up any dictionary definition of that. It's that wedge-shaped piece that holds an arch together. It's basically the last piece that's there, and it helps the arch to be self-supporting. So it's basically the thing on which other things rely on for support. So if you look at all those different individual bricks, could be programs, tools, data sets, support mechanisms. But the thing that often bridges that, at least for me in the work I do, is bringing it down to the locally led level and that incentive-based level. So the needs of our producers, irrigators, ranchers, it comes down to the capacity at the grassroots level, that local level. And really kind of the message that I would like to share is if we have a strong bias to this locally led process, we've proven that it can be successful in obtaining your desired outcomes. And it can help you move more focused on outcomes rather than outputs that we often see. That I'm a big proponent of this because of the mantra of conservation districts being really those local leaders helping to garner that support and implementation of projects at the local level. What's important though in all of this is that there's a carrot and sticks approach that we often misuse or continue to use that term, but it really, if you get to the heart of it, the effort has to be worth the squeeze, so to speak. So the outcomes that come from these locally led incentive-based efforts, they really have to be worth it. They have to be better than the stick. The carrot has to be better than the stick. So the outcome really must be worth the effort. And a lot of the things that have really brought people to the table where I'm working is the stick. It's the regulatory things, the threat of curtailment of water, a whole host of other issues that may get people to the table, but it's the carrot, those outcomes that keep people at the table. So shifting now to a specific portion of Eureka County, it's called Diamond Valley. It's actually where I'm at right now. This slide here is just an airplane view of Diamond Valley. If you look in the lower right-hand corner, you could see the town of Eureka, which is the county seat of Eureka County. And then you can see all the irrigated fields out in Diamond Valley. And then at the north end, so this is looking from south to north, at the north end, you can see a playa or a groundwater discharge area. So Diamond Valley is typical of many basins in Nevada or in the Great Basin. It's a terminal basin. We don't have any river system. Everything, it's a flow system, and that groundwater all terminates at that groundwater discharge area at the north end of the valley. 26,000 acres under active irrigation as we sit here today. It's always been seen as the stable socioeconomic base for Eureka County. 2/3 of all the municipal and domestic water supply for all the residents of Eureka County come from Diamond Valley. So the town supply for the town of Eureka, we have some general improvement districts that have their quasi-municipal water uses, a lot of domestic wells. They all rely, or 2/3 of our population rely on the groundwater in Diamond Valley. A little bit different picture than what Ben just shared too. We have small amounts of surface water irrigation from some of the small streams that drain off of the mountains, but it's very small in comparison. And all those circles you see out in the valley are all dependent on groundwater pumping. The amount of water that's been determined to be able to be extracted on a sustainable basis in Nevada, we call that the perennial yield. That amount has been determined to be about 30,000 acre feet of water per year that can be sustainably extracted and consumed and used. And we are greatly over allocated as far as water rights here, which is typical to a lot of areas, and where we've been over pumping our aquifer for over 50 years. So that's created depletion of the groundwater resource. This slide is actually a few years old. The average drawdown of the water table in Diamond Valley has been about 2 feet per year, and that's average. So some areas it can be as much as 4 or 5 feet, others it's maybe only a half a foot, but on average it's been 2 feet decline per year, and that's been going on for over 50 years. So in the main pumping area of Diamond Valley there in the center, we've had over 100 foot of drawdown, and then it extends towards the periphery. And the results of that, many wells have had to be deepened, gone dry. We have a lot of issues with domestic wells as well, going dry, people not having the resources to replace or deepen their domestic wells. Then there becomes a demand on the municipal system to then, build out to a lot of these areas at great expense. So if you look at what all this means as far as kind of the legalities of this, is Nevada's typical of Western water law. It is a prior appropriation state, meaning those that have the oldest water rights have the right to use all of their water before somebody with a more junior priority water right or later in time water right. So this graph here, that red line that is horizontal across the graph, that is the 30,000 acre foot sustainable level of pumping. And then there's the date on the bottom and the cumulative duty or acre feet on the vertical axis. So you can see that a large majority of the water rights in Diamond Valley are junior in priority. And if you were to regulate by strict priority, meaning you cut off all the junior water rights, you can see how it would be 60 to 70% of all the water rights in Diamond Valley. Our legislature recognized in 2011, the 2011 Nevada legislative session, some of the issues related to these basins that have been allowed to be overpumped and overallocated, where the state, at no fault of irrigators, the irrigators asked for a license or a right to do something and were granted that. And then decades later, we're now grappling with this depletion and overallocation. Our state legislature did provide some enabling legislation that allowed gave the authority to our state water engineer to designate a groundwater basin as a critical management area. And if the state engineer does that, it creates what I call a 10-year stopwatch, where it starts a time frame for then local water rights holders to come together and work on developing a community-based groundwater management plan that can build in things for reducing water use other than just strict prior appropriation. So that was in 2011. The state engineer did designate Diamond Valley as a critical management area in 2015. And then there were some efforts by community members to come together and start kind of informally talking about what they could do to try to reduce pumping in Diamond Valley. So this here is the slide. The photo on the left is kind of those informal efforts where a farmer group, a cooperative came together and their members would meet periodically and talk about, hey, if we were to move forward with a plan, what could it have? But I wouldn't say it was an exclusive group, but there were fits and starts and different factions of people coming together. But that critical management area designation of the state engineer really did then more formalize the process. It created an incentive, that 10-year time frame, for people to come together. Under the state law, if a groundwater management plan is not developed and approved within or at the end of that 10-year or within or by the end of that 10-year time frame, the state engineer is required to then regulate by priority, meaning just draw the line and cut people off. So the tool became available for local communities to, on paper, to come together and develop a plan, but it came down to capacity and whether or not the community had the capacity to actually pull together all of the information and the writing of the plan and all that to come together. And that's where Eureka County and the Eureka Conservation District stood up, recognizing that call, and provided some of that capacity to help get the groundwater management plan process moving forward. There was professional facilitators brought in, there were hydrologists brought in, there were a lot of folks to come talk through some of the science and some of the things that could be done. And so that effort took place over about 4 years, and then a plan was inked. It met the majority criteria required, where a majority of the water rights holders signed on to that plan, submitted it to our state water engineer, and he approved the plan in 2019. The plan did wend its way through litigation like all things water. It went to the Nevada Supreme Court. We're on a split decision. The Nevada Supreme Court did uphold the plan, and we just are finishing the third year under the groundwater management plan. So the GMP is what we call it, the Diamond Valley GMP. It is a water market-based system where people's water rights, using a certain formula according to how senior or junior they were, their water right was converted to shares. So they hold a share of the entire amount of water available in Diamond Valley. And then over time, there's pumping reductions that are mandated. But it also incentivizes conservation because it allows unused water or unpumped water to be banked, and that's left in the aquifer, and it can be withdrawn in a future time. So those that push the edges of conservation at the beginning and put in those irrigation efficiency practices really benefit because they bank water early on in the plan. And then later years, when the water becomes more scarce as far as pumping reductions, it allows them to withdraw that water at that time. It also allows for quick sale, lease, trade, et cetera, for folks that need water or want to sell water or trade water or barter water, whatever it is, that they don't have to go through a lot of the typical water rights approvals process. It's much more streamlined. There's also, the plan doesn't mandate what types of crops can be grown, any type of irrigation efficiencies that are required, just simply has groundwater pumping levels set, and then it's up to people to implement what they need to meet those levels. But we do have a lot of support through the extension system, NRCS programs, peer-to-peer learning, a lot of these things to help on the actual practices for reducing water use. I'm not going to read all of these. I just wanted to throw these up here. These are the cut and paste goals stated in the groundwater management plan, basically the desired outcomes of the water rights holders that they established that they want the plan to reach towards. And so it's, again, that outcome driven process that this plan is trying to get to. A few other things that are in the plan. It's not just about just simply the numbers of water, but it does have some statements that and some land management type goals that I would say are the value added things for the groundwater management plan. And these are the specific things that are listed in the groundwater management plan. So one of them, the first one there is seek out funding to purchase and retire water rights to basically help get to the goals of the groundwater management plan earlier. It comes with that question, well, what do we do with lands after water's retired? The other point is some managed groundwater recharge, watershed management to increase water supplies. Also, importation of groundwater and cloud seeding are both mentioned there, but that's not a space that I have been working in. So the ones I'm going to focus on here are the watershed management, and then also the funding to purchase and retire water rights. So here's another photo of Diamond Valley. You can see it's not just an agricultural area. It's surrounded by a lot of public land managed by the Bureau of Land Management. Some very intact rangelands, some high value wildlife habitats, pinyon juniper woodlands, sage grouse habitat. There's a broad mix of values here that people feel are important. We have done a lot of work in the space around the irrigated fields as well as all the rangelands, because we see those things as co-beneficial to each other. And again, the center of all this work has been through that locally led process through the Eureka Conservation District and Eureka County. Don't need to get into a lot of details of this. I just thought it was interesting to show that this is the Diamond Valley area. The map here shows the Fish and Wildlife Service and USGS sagebrush conservation design data set, showing core sagebrush areas, growth opportunity areas for sagebrush and other rangeland areas. And then I also put on this some of the pinyon and juniper areas that we have been working in. All the pink, if you can see that, those are all the habitat projects we have done where we've pulled in literally hundreds of thousands of dollars through various partners to implement a lot of these projects to benefit sage grouse, to benefit mule deer, to benefit other wildlife, and to also benefit the hydrology. And most of those polygons you see are on private land. There are quite a few now we're starting to pick up in partnership with the Bureau of Land Management, but many of those are on private land. And again, it's because of those local relationships, that trust building, and those landowners knowing that we're striving towards shared outcomes by doing a lot of these things. But part of our effort too is looking at these habitat projects where we have done quite a bit of pinyon and juniper woodland management and thinning and removal, especially where the trees are encroaching into sagebrush habitat. And we started trying to look at it in a more holistic manner looking at that as a resource that we could maybe implement in some of our water savings efforts in Diamond Valley. So what I'm showing here is a mobile pyrolysis unit that we brought in that basically took some chips from pinyon and juniper treatments that we had done, and we were able to run those through that pyrolysis unit and create biochar. And the idea with this mobile unit is you can take this to the area where your treatments are taking place. We created that biochar. We also created compost with pinyon and juniper chips as the primary carbon source in that compost. And then we did co-compost where we had pinyon and juniper chips as well as biochar. And then all of that end product we made were intended for soil amendments to increase mostly the soil moisture and water holding capacity of the soils that we apply those in. So a couple quick things we did. This is a mine that's just out of the town of Eureka. It's called the Ruby Hill Mine. These are some waste rock dumps where they are having a really hard time getting reclamation on these, getting a tremendous amount of runoff, sedimentation, and other things going into a nearby channel. And we put in these various research plots called mesocosms where we did various concentrations, various treatments with biochar and compost to help reclaim some of those dumps again, mostly in trying to increase the soil moisture holding capacity. This is some of it was research driven, but applied research. We were trying to learn, the best application and then do that more broad scale. And then our second thing we did was focusing on the irrigated ground in Diamond Valley, but not just the green pivot, but those corners that we often see that aren't irrigated when you have center pivot irrigation. And the idea in trying to get beneficial vegetation to grow on those corners without irrigation, as well as capturing some of that moisture and holding it in those soils to help increase recharge into Diamond Valley. So this is actually one of the pivots that we did some of our biochar, compost, and co-compost treatments on. And I can get into details on some of this if anybody has any questions on it later on some of our results. If you want more of our efforts in pinyon juniper work and tying that to kind of the hydrology and drought and water side of things, there's a lot of information here through the Nevada Pinyon Juniper Partnership website. So the second point, I did mention that the groundwater management plan did call for seeking out funding to purchase and retire water rights. This has been taking place in the state of Nevada. The state had some remaining ARPA funding that they programmed for just this exact purpose. And they did a call for proposals for folks to bring forward, to stand up potential programs to purchase and retire groundwater rights. And the state, recognizing that they are culpable in a lot of the over allocation of water and wanted to be part of that solution and helping soften the landing for people where we can't continue to overuse the groundwater like we have been. So there were $7 million that was allocated for the Central Nevada region, and that includes Diamond Valley, but there are many other basins in the Central Nevada region. When they went out for applications on that, they did not receive a single application from any basin in the Central region other than Diamond Valley. And I believe there's reasons for that. And I think a lot of it is, again, there's that stick hanging over people's heads here about curtailment. There's a groundwater management plan in place that has pretty strict groundwater withdrawal levels that are set. there's a lot of different reasons I think people were incentivized to sell back their groundwater rights to the state. When the state saw the interest in Diamond Valley and that there was not enough funding to fund all of that interest, they did reprogram money from some other places, sent it our way for a second round of water right retirement applications. And overall, we're going to be able to retire and remove from pumping about 12,000 acre feet of groundwater, which is a big deal for Diamond Valley. But there becomes this question now, well, what do we do with all of these previously irrigated lands? And what's the land use we transition these things to? So the Conservation District, Eureka County, and the Nature Conservancy have all come together and working on a feasibility study that is available online if you just search this title of this report here, Resolving Groundwater Overuse. And it's essentially looking at the feasibility of the water rights retirement and then transitioning these lands to agrivoltaics or solar power installations that still have that agricultural component to that. And we're looking more on like the dry land type agriculture, grazing, maybe some native seed production and other things. But this report is now pushing us into the second phase where we're looking at establishing a demonstration project to prove out some of these concepts. So what I've learned through all of this process is that, we do have water is scarce and there's a lot of different interests at the table. And I have learned, I do think consensus is possible, but not unanimity. And that's my personal opinion. I don't think we're ever going to get everybody to agree on one common path as a unanimous voice. But when I use the term consensus, I use that in the sense of people being able to live with the results. They may not raise their hand and vote for a certain thing, but they're able to fall within that space and work towards that solution and not fight it. And that's kind of where I do think consensus is possible.
Come in.
One of the struggles we've had, though, along this process is that when I say here that legal and technical matters do matter. So providing tools to a local community to come up with solutions is great. But there's a lot of capacity gaps. So one of the things that when we were developing the groundwater management plan is we did have a local hydrologist that was assisting. We had a lot of the technical expertise. We had an irrigation specialist. We had all the great efforts through extension and a lot of the resources they bring to bear. But on the legal side, we didn't have attorneys in the room. We didn't have folks, helping kind of set those goalposts for legal matters and whatever. And with all things water, as I mentioned, the groundwater management plan was litigated, but we did not have attorneys writing the plan. We had lay people writing the plan and we had some, technical expertise, but that is something that I think is a gap, is providing some of that, the regulatory and legal assistance to some of these communities when you're providing local tools to them, also providing some of the legal advice and sideboards that comes with that. And again, it all comes down to focusing on the outcomes rather than the outputs. And I'm very fortunate to live in a community where our county commissioners and our county, our conservation district are willing to put a lot of resources and seek out resources to bring to the table and to work on some of these issues. So with that, Noah and group, I'll kick it back. I'm happy to take any questions now or reserve that till the discussion later.
Great, thank you, Jake. I think we could have time for one question. While maybe Matt, if you want to go ahead and get your screen set up. I do want to make sure that we reserve some time for group discussion. And we're scheduled to go till 2:30 or 3:30 Mountain Time. But there is no other session after this. So if you're able to stay on, we might push the discussion a little past half hour. But yeah, if there's no immediate question, let's hear from Matt and then let's open it up for broader discussion. Take it away, Matt.
Okay, Noah, can you hear and see okay?
Yep.
Everything's good. Okay. Well, I could probably just sit down and say amen um, to what Jake and Ben just covered. Thank you both. Great summaries of um, existing efforts and needs surrounding water and agriculture in the West. Um, so I maybe share a few thoughts about the discussion, tell you a little bit about Utah. We have a lot of similarities, I think, to Nevada, with maybe a few differences, but let's dig in. I'll tell you a little bit about Utah, what some of the needs are and some of the things that we're working on. So first, just want to tell you a little bit about Utah, if you're unfamiliar. On the left, it shows land ownership. You'll see the yellow stands out really quickly. That's BLM land. Majority of land in Utah is federal land. Most of that is not irrigated though. It's pasture, mountainous area. Much of that is used for grazing livestock. We have about 10 million acres of land that's used for grazing. And so the livestock industry is a major part of our state, our economy, our land use. On the right, just showing the water basins. I just want to highlight a couple of things. We have the Salt Lake Basin in the northern part of the state, which covers much of the north. Probably can't see my cursor. It's kind of hard to show. On the eastern half, nearly the eastern half of the state is all water from the Colorado River. And then we do have some groundwater areas. Most of our water is surface that we use for agriculture, but there are some areas of groundwater. So in the south west corner of the state, we use a lot of groundwater in that area. Here, this just shows where we irrigate in Utah. We irrigate a little over 1 million acres, about 1.2 million acres of land. Most of that is in the valleys, the mountainous valleys, where we have the most fertile soils and where we developed our irrigation system. Just a quick look at our crops. Like other states, Nevada and some other Western states, most of our production is perennial forage. About half of our irrigated land is alfalfa. Another large portion is either other types of grass or other types of hay, mainly grass or grass mixtures, and then a pretty good chunk of pasture. Corn and small grains are our next largest field crops, and then we've got some vegetable, fruit, other types of crops. We like like Nevada, we have some water issues. I'm just going to tell you about a couple of the big ones. One is the Colorado River. I think most of you are probably familiar with challenges concerning that basin. Ongoing, large, complex issues with the Colorado River Basin. It serves about 40 million people in total. It represents about half of the irrigated land in Utah. So a big chunk. Most of you are also aware, or all of you are aware, that a couple years ago we were in a really dire situation. 2022, we had the lowest levels ever recorded history in many of the reservoirs in that basin. Particular concern was Lake Powell and Lake Mead, two of the largest reservoirs. Were at the lowest level ever. There's complex compacts that govern how the water is used in these basins. They're set to be renegotiated in 2026, but in 2022, the Bureau of Reclamation kind of put some emergency measures in place to say that things needed to be done, plans needed to be made to reduce water use to maintain the viability of those two reservoirs as we got to those 2026 compacts or new compacts. And so they called for a large reduction, 2 to 4 million acre feet of water be reduced in those basins in the years that followed. So states were scrambling to figure out what do we do? How do we come up with more water? How do we conserve? And agriculture is usually at the forefront of that discussion, because most of the water that we use, that we divert in Utah and the Colorado River Basin, comes from or is used for agriculture. So a huge and an ongoing challenge for much of the state of Utah. The other big challenge is the Great Salt Lake. In that same year, we had lowest lake elevation that we've ever had on record. You can see the history there. Caused a lot of concern, national, really international news about issues surrounding the Salt Lake. Lots of concern for the health of the lake, the health of the people that live around the lake, the health of the ecosystem supported by the lake. And so just lots of concern and effort surrounding how do we maintain sustainable, healthy lake levels to keep things in check. So fortunately, the 2 years that followed, 2023 and 2024, both very wet, even record wet years. So alleviated some of this concern, but still a long-term challenge for the state. So just two of the big examples. There's others, lots of others that we could talk about. I first just going to tell you about a few of the needs that we've heard from water users and managers, and then I'll talk about some of the things that we've done. Usually when we identify a need, it's then we work to meet that need as quick as we can. But some of these needs are ongoing and not simple solutions, and so I'll tell you what some of those needs are, what we've been working on, just a few examples, and then some of the ongoing needs. So here's what we've heard. Just last couple of years, we've held workshops and listening sessions with managers and users. I've grouped this into three categories. One was measurement, for lots of need for water loss data on farms. Where is water being lost? What does the balance for water look like on a farm? How can we tighten that? How can we better manage it? Also a need for just measurement infrastructure and calibration and ideal placement on large streams and gauges, but also in other conveyance systems on farms. And then also heard this a lot, the accuracy of the measurements, all measurements dealing with water balances, right? Diversion, depletion with all of its other factors, the loss of water through evapotranspiration and through deep percolation and runoff. A lot of those values are estimated and have error, and so just a large need to really tighten those, understand how accurate each piece of the water balance is, and what the implications are for a lot of the decisions that we make surrounding water. When it comes to management, a few of the needs we heard was just the need for funding and support for irrigation projects, improvements, both on the farm field and also in our conveyance systems. More transparent data sharing and availability, that's a big one that keeps coming up a lot. Many are hesitant to share that water use data. So there's a need to incentivize that, to make it safe, but be able to share that data so that better management can occur. Related to that, it's just greater access to the data, in easy to understand formats, right? Water use on farms, in irrigation systems, so that we can make better decisions. Many water managers actually noted that with the lack of data, sometimes they just have to use other ways, how they feel or what's available. So that's a challenge. One other that was interesting is just we heard from many that they wanted greater representation. We have some organizations that represent water users generally, but they're large and not specific. We don't have very many that represent water managers. And so there's ideas floating around about organizations, groups that could help represent the interests of water users and managers. And finally, heard a lot about education needs, just needs for greater training for both water users and managers. How do they improve their water management and measurement? Some have suggested some peer mentorship programs where maybe one irrigation company could go spend time with another irrigation company and learn about how to better measure water. And then heard several sentiments about just public education. A lot of misconceptions about water use, water management in Utah. And so many water managers and users felt like we need to have just greater education for the public on what the challenges actually are, what the limitations are, and solutions. So those are just a list of some of the needs that we've heard and seen in Utah. We've tried to meet in part some of those. I'll tell you about just a few. In terms of irrigation support for measurement and management, this is a program that we've initiated with support from a conservancy district in the Colorado River Basin. We've named it Ag Drip. Stands for Agricultural Demonstration Research Implementation Program. It's not just drip irrigation. It's a program that supports irrigation measurement and management on farms. So we currently have 50 participants. We plan to have up to 150 over the next 3 years. And we're covering kind of the many different farm types in the Colorado River Basin. On these farms, we provide a lot of different support mechanisms. One is that we provide money to test alternative crops. We also install a soil moisture sensor that becomes the farms. The soil moisture sensor is used to help guide the irrigation and also to help monitor water balance on these fields. We collect soil samples, water samples, help them identify any issues, any opportunities to adjust their irrigation. We also do irrigation evaluations. So we evaluate their system to see how their pivot, wheel line, surface irrigation is performing and help them know where they can improve. We provide a flow monitoring device with telemetry for 5 years to help farmers get into the practice of monitoring water use and then also sharing that information. In terms of financial support, our state has invested almost over $275 million towards what we call water optimization projects. A large chunk of this is going to as a cost share, where they'll pay 50 to 75% of the cost to change an irrigation system. And a lot of it is also going to conveyance systems, so in piping, lining, canals, ditches. They have spent probably 70, 80 million of this, and there's still a lot of money to be spent. But making a large dent in improving our irrigation infrastructure in the state. Another related project, this affects Utah and the whole upper basin of the Colorado River, is a system-wide conservation pilot program that the Bureau of Reclamation and others have implemented. This program, you can see here, has been implemented on several Utah farms in 2023 and 24, where farmers have been paid to reduce water use. Most of that is occurred through fallowing of land. Here's just a snapshot of what has occurred. So in Utah, there's this year, we're still on 24. There's been 31 projects, over 10,000 acres, about 22,000 acre feet of consumed or conserved consumptive use that's been saved, and that's the compensation, a little over $10 million for farmers to reduce their water use. In terms of education, we've done a lot of things to try to improve training and education for those that manage water. One that has been highly successful has been training the irrigation industry, those that sell and service irrigation systems. So for the past 5-6 years, we've held these trainings every other year, and over 100 irrigation professionals from Utah and Idaho have come and participated in these events. Related, just last year, we heard from water managers, so irrigation companies, staff, personnel, leaders, that they needed more training and more opportunities for networking and education. So we started doing these field days trainings for water managers. In 2023, we did one. We did two in 2024. Highly successful, really just bringing water managers together across the state, something that hasn't happened before. One other thing I'll mention in closing here, with the Salt Lake and all the issues surrounding the Salt Lake, it's brought together diverse teams of people that haven't worked with each other before. So different universities, state agencies, farm organizations, and others have all tried to come together to provide some solutions, options, get the best data and science that we can available surrounding the management of the Great Salt Lake to help provide policymakers with the best science and information we can to make difficult decisions. So that's just a few of the things that we've done. There's still a lot of needs. Most of those needs that I mentioned before are ongoing. We're just searching for ways to use less water in agriculture and still help it be viable. So thanks. I think I'll end there and hopefully leave plenty of time for discussion.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt. I wonder if you could put your slides back up and go back to the list of needs that you had. I want to maybe use this as a prompt. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so I wanted to maybe use this as a jumping off point for discussion. Maybe for Ben and Jake, and then for anyone else, is there anything that particularly resonated on this list, or is there anything else that you would want to add to this list?
Yeah, I would definitely echo the need for all of those things. Data is a huge thing that we're always struggling to collect and collect accurately. I don't think there's been enough innovative development on how to measure those, at least on an affordable platform. So that's a big one for us. We have to measure everything. So we're always trying to figure out better ways to do that.
And no, I would second, a lot of those needs on the data or water use measurements, I guess, that's one thing we grappled with a lot here. When you're entering some kind of water market and, where folks are under mandated reductions, it's important that your water use measurements are extremely accurate. And so one resource that may be available that you may want to think about is looking at what the state of Idaho did, where they, they have an approved flow meter list, and any water use in the state of Idaho, you have to use a flow meter that's on that list, and it's linked with Utah State University's water lab, where they test all the meters and certify which meters meet this specific error range of accuracy. And so we use that same list. And so like in Diamond Valley, you have to be using a flow meter on that list. So it gives confidence in the water use, the standard measurement, and that's important. So it's a level playing field for everybody, that some aren't, you can't point fingers, I guess, for some are saying, well, I'm using a more accurate measure than they are, kind of thing. So it kind of levels the playing field there.
Excellent. Yeah, so I just want to invite everyone to turn their cameras on if you're still with us, and feel free to jump in, introduce yourself, tell us about where you work, who you work with, and your thoughts on needs related to drought and irrigation.
Hey everybody, my name is AJ Purdy. I'm a research scientist located in Monterey, California, but work with NASA and the OpenET project. One of the things that we've been trying to do in a responsible manner is, provide that accurate data to address, some of these information gaps. But one of the challenges is always assembling the right ground-based observations to compare and kind of advance those applications. I'd be curious in hearing your thoughts on the right way to kind of collaborate with your groups as a way to, move some affordable options forward to address these gaps while still maintaining and respecting, privacy of landowners. And I realize it's a open-ended question here.
Maybe I'll just mention, AJ, one thing that's happening in Utah is that we're revisiting how we do water accounting. A group at Utah State University is working with our water rights division. They've asked us to help them identify ways to track water use, explore different methods. OpenET is at the forefront of a lot of those discussions. And so there's lots of opportunities to see how it can fit in as a tool for water use. As you noted, I think privacy is going to be a challenge, but in terms of a wide scale tool that can help with water accounting, I think it shines, right? There's a lot of opportunities to do that. So, and I don't know about other states, but I think others are probably doing very similar things, exploring how OpenET fits with their existing accounting and how to utilize it going forward. So,
and if I can, so OpenET, if you look, one of the use cases in OpenET is Diamond Valley, and there is some publications. They really, since we have such high quality pumpage data, we have magnetic flow meters on every single well in Diamond Valley. So they've been able to use Diamond Valley to help, test OpenET, and so it's been very useful. But on the privacy issue too, part of that is for us, people are under mandated pumping reductions. So we got to know what people are using, and they know that. So it's helped us kind of get past that. But in some of these other areas where there's not really, we do have a lot of concerned people with the satellite in the sky kind of concept type thing. But, we've sold it to a lot of farmers here, and that, like OpenET specifically, is it's already publicly accessible information. OpenET just puts it all together in a spot that makes it easier for people to use.
And I'd say we don't have nearly enough data as we would like. And the privacy issue is not a big concern to us, because as a federal project, we can go wherever we want to go, leading right up to an individual's head gate. So, and that is where we'd like to have a lot more measurement devices. So, yeah. Any assistance anybody out there, wants to give as far as measuring anything within our district, we're more than open to supporting that kind of effort, because We just don't have the number one, the staff, and number two, the technology to be able to get the data that we really need.
So, Ben, is part of the challenge money, or is it really around staff time and just getting it out in the field, or is it a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. Staffing is a big issue, just because we're kind of at a max as far as what we can afford to pay for staff. And those who are responsible for measuring and supporting that technology out in the field, we have 3 people, and it's just not enough to be able to collect the data that we need. And we have a lot of remote devices and stuff like that that collects data, but still, it's just it's not as robust as it needs to be.
Yeah, speaking to the funding issue, which of course is always a major barrier for any solution we might hope to adopt. I'd be curious to hear from anyone on the call, including our speakers, but anyone else, if you could take that barrier away, if you had a blank check, what would you like to do to address adaptation needs for irrigation in the Southwest? Sounds like, Ben, you'd be hiring some.
Yeah, yeah, we would. Well, we'd also have we need to develop some software. We just don't have the reporting capacity that we need to have. You look out into the market for software to track your water deliveries and report those back to the water user, and it's all geared toward like municipal water meters and that kind of thing, whereas that kind of platform just doesn't work for our needs, and so that's a big part of it. You collect all of this data. Well, what do you do with it now? How do you put it into some kind of readable, understandable type of report? And while we do that now, it takes a tremendous effort. It has, a lot of errors that are created by humans, and so that's a big project we have that's going to cost a lot of money. We've got to hire somebody to develop some software for us that's crafted exactly the way we need it to be. So if anybody knows anybody.
No, that's an interesting question. I certainly have had a blank check. I think I'd invest a lot of money in measurement, like we've talked about, right? Just really getting as accurate as we can on measuring water use everywhere. So definitely put a lot of money there. This one I'm a little torn on. There's a lot of, so once we can measure everything really accurately, we also have to figure out how do we use less, right? How do we deal with less water? What's the best solutions for doing that? And a lot of people turn to alternative crops, right? Getting rid of a lot of alfalfa, grass, hay, because it uses more water than other crops. So there could be an argument for, just massive investments in new crops, new markets to support those crops. On the other hand, there's a really large and compelling argument for the flexibility that perennial systems offer, alfalfa and grass, where we can shut irrigation off at nearly any point of the season and still maintain a crop, still maintain a cover, still have some options in our systems. And so I don't know. It's challenging when it comes to those types of changes. I think there's large investments in providing more flexibility for farms, right? Irrigation systems that they can manage easier, quicker, that reduce impacts of less water, drought, or shortages or curtailments, or so investing large amounts of money into, I think, resiliency for farms where they can manage their water more effectively and still thrive.
Well, I'm going to jump in on. So I've had to convert myself to this idea of water rights retirement because being a farm kid from Eastern Idaho, and I hate to see farmland come out of production. But in many of the areas in the West, there's no calculus that you can work out where there aren't certain, you have to take some land out of irrigated production. So that question, and I think like we're at, so much of where we are is because of government incentives, whether it's the desert land entries, that provided this basically free land. So you can see this photo behind me, all those circles, every one of those are desert land entries, federal incentive, the state over allocated water. There's all these things incentivizing people to come here. And then the reality is for us is we can implement all the irrigation efficiency. We can be on the cutting edge of everything, alternative crops and whatever else, but we still don't have enough water to satisfy all those lands behind me. So having something like that water rights retirement to help soften the blow for some of these communities and producers and help them transition to something else, whether it's dry land or some other land use, that's really important for us. And that's where we think this renewable energy, as much as some people may hate that as well, these are previously disturbed lands that we need to do something with, and some agrivoltaic component is maybe a piece that will help us, at least from my perspective.
So, Jake, do you think there's where do you start with that? Is there an education component, or is like in terms of the drought learning network and something we can take a step towards that? What do you think is the first step? Is it just sharing what other people are doing, like the example that you shared today?
As far as like the agrivoltaic side of things, or?
I think the idea of water rights retirement and the whole conundrum you talked about, and then transitioning to something different, what would that different system look like?
Well, and I think it looks different in every community, and that's where, I again focus. You want to focus what the locals, kind of their self-determination. So with a broad brush, I think you got to say, well, we want the local communities to help us determine what they want. But from that broad brush, yeah, it's again knowing that we have thousands of acres that with either future water scarcity, shortages, curtailments, whatever it is, we have less land under irrigation. We know that's going to occur. So what do we do with those lands? And that is that overarching question. I think, rather than the sterile landscape of solar panels, I like to say, having still that agricultural component is something my community would really want to see, where they're willing to, a lot of these lands are entering leases for solar, but we're trying to help incentivize in a way that they still retain some of that agricultural character, the open space character, and that this doesn't become this sterile landscape. But I think the drought learning network, there's a lot of resources out there. Steve Lowhide with Madison, University of Madison, Wisconsin, doing a lot in the space. There's a lot, but it's kind of the cart before the horse type thing. And sometimes the solar industry is moving along a lot faster than we can address some of these agrivoltaic or ecovoltaic issues.
Well, fantastic. So, we're at our scheduled time here. And of course, if anyone needs to leave, or should we go ahead and wrap it up, Emily?